For the past 2 years and 3 months, I've learned an average of 13 new words in German every day, which adds up to 10,000 words. I want to explain how I did it and how a few habits can help you either start on or continue on the path towards mastery of another language. 2 years ago, I began learning German as an Ashkenazi Jew with a wife who grew up in Germany and speaks German, and since I have an interest in history, I figured I would learn German at some point. When my wife wasn't sure that she would speak German with our future kids, I decided I would learn the language to try to get her to reconsider. And with a full-time job and becoming a father less than a year into starting my journey learning German, I had to find ways to squeeze German into my life. The internet's polyglot grandfather Steve Kaufman says that beyond the total number of words that you know in a language, learning a language primarily comes down to three things.
The time spent with the language, the attitude of the learner, the ability to notice.
And so if I wanted to learn as many words in the language and spend as much time with German as I could, where to begin? With a textbook, of course. I used this grammar book for the first few weeks of learning German just to demystify a few of the more soul-deadening things. Noun articles, basic pronunciation, and how separable verbs work in German. But even with a great grammar textbook like this one is, this routine got real old real quick. As an American who learned Spanish in middle school and high school but can't speak it at all, I know that grammar and textbooks are no guarantee that you'll actually learn a language. But I'm a bit of a YouTube connoisseur, most likely just like you, and so I typed German into the search bar within YouTube and I came across the on-the-street interviews of the Easy German team. These are all German real-life interviews with both English and German subtitles, so they work great as a beginner and also as you improve with the language. It's just compelling conversations on a lot of different topics. You want to know how a 55-year-old budgets in Germany? There you go. How about a 26-year-old describing her Sunday in Berlin? Perfect. The videos would have been charming in English, so the fact that German seeps into your head as you're watching is just an added benefit. There are plenty of channels just like this or similar for other languages, and for the first month I was relying heavily on these English subtitles, but it was a fun challenge and mystery trying to peek over at the German subtitles just to keep me on my toes. And when I realized that these videos would be a great source of varied vocabulary, I needed to find a way to get that vocabulary into my head, ideally as efficiently as possible. I had tried physical note cards early on to learn German words, but I had a few issues. First of all, how do you decide which note cards to review if you don't want to review all of your words every single day? And second, when have I quote unquote learned a word and can I stop reviewing that card? And third, do I review words from German to English or English back to German? Anki, or Anki, is a digital note card app with spaced repetition software that took care of most of the frustrations that I had with making and reviewing physical note cards. The most important part about Anki is that it only shows you words when you need to see them, not every single day. So it shows you a new word. If you get that right, they'll show you the next day. If you get it right again, then a week later, and then if you get it right again, a month later, etc. But when you review a word and don't remember it, Anki understands that the word is harder for you and it'll show it to you more often to reactivate the word in your brain. Because of this smart scheduling, if you scale that up to dozens or hundreds or thousands of words, this becomes a very powerful tool. I'll link to other videos that explain in more detail how Anki works, etc. But let me be clear, I know 10,000 words in German because of Anki. I started by making very simple note cards based on the YouTube videos that I was watching and the textbook that I was working with. It was a German word on one side and then an English definition or two, just a few words, and maybe a picture. This format worked for me because I could make the cards very easily, maybe a few hundred in one sitting if I found enough words, and reviewing them only took 3 or 4 seconds. I use these as double-sided note cards, where on the first day I would learn German over to English, and then the next day Anki would show me the English side of the card and I'd have to get it over to German. Like I mentioned, it was an average of 13 new cards a day, but I would just go through the full stack of whatever Anki had scheduled for me for that day, based on my previous reviews. Anki is primarily a free desktop app, which is what I used at the beginning to both make and review cards. And while the mobile version on Android is free, the iOS version for iPhones costs $25. And I wasn't sure that that was worth it at the beginning until I was confident that the system would work for me. After a week of seeing how fun and engaging and effective the reviews could be, I had to make a decision. Either I could stick with just using the desktop experience, or I could view the $25 as a bet that I could learn 1,000 words in German. So I paid for the app and began seriously making and reviewing note cards. That meant that I had a tool, but now I needed to find a compelling and organized way to find what I would learn. 2 months after I started learning German using YouTube and this textbook, my wife and I went to Germany for the first time to visit family. I could catch individual words in conversations as she was catching up with old friends, and I walked around on the streets mesmerized by the street signs in German and seeing the stores, etc. As a bit of a bookworm, I knew that I wanted to get some books, but reading was still painfully slow, so we went to a bookstore. In the store, we quickly decided that even though kids' books definitely matched my level, it didn't seem like it was worth the money. So we went to peruse the science section and came across this book, which translates to Explain It to Me Like I'm 5. The book is a series of questions and answers on a million different topics, and since each question and answer is only about a page long, we figured that I'd be able to go through one question and answer a day for about 20 to 30 minutes. And since the book is only 220 pages overall, that's long, but not too long. The book is written in informal but precise language, and it's on a bunch of different topics, so I'd be able to learn German and stoke my curiosity and have fun, but it would also be an uphill battle. So we got this book. And this book became my Rosetta Stone. And I don't mean Rosetta Stone, the language learning app. I mean my literal Rosetta Stone, the same way that we deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs. My process for reading was relatively simple. I would try to read a sentence. I would read until I couldn't understand a word. I would type that into Google Translate as my dictionary and see if that unlocked the rest of the sentence. Then I would quickly make an Anki card in about 10 seconds. That would be both German to English and English back to German. And I would do that for every word that I didn't know as I was reading. And then the next time I opened up Anki, I would learn the German to English version of that card, and then the next day the English to German version of that card. I said before that this was going to be an uphill battle, but reading this book was like walking through concrete. There is a special feeling of being in hell when you understand all of the individual words in a sentence but have no idea what it's trying to tell you. But every single day I would have these moments of recognizing a word that I had previously learned with Anki, or when a sentence just clicked into place, and these moments were so addicting. Overall, things were hard, but these moments gave me motivation to keep pushing uphill, and I felt like a little kid discovering the world, and I got to share these cool articles or questions and answers with my wife. In hindsight, I probably didn't need to make a new vocab card for all of these very specific words that a beginner doesn't need to know. And Google Translate was definitely a crutch early on, but both of those things helped me continue working with the book and keep working on German and improving my skills. Reading was definitely my main input activity, but I did continue watching YouTube videos and these interviews, and I also started listening to podcasts, though I was understanding very little early on. The more I read and the more I watched, the more I was able to build my intuition for the language, so I understood not just the individual words, but the meaning, and then the music, and then the feel of the language. After about 6 months of reading these questions and answers and learning 13 new words a day, I finished the book, and I learned 1,500 new words from this book. And those 1,500 words became the foundation of my German, and definitely felt like a good return on investment for that initial $25 purchase of the Anki iOS app. So I was ready to push forward to 10,000 total words. The author James Clear has shared the following: before you discover what you love, fewer commitments, more experiments. After you discover what you love, fewer experiments, more commitments. With Anki for vocabulary, books for reading, YouTube and podcasts for listening and watching, I had the influx of words and understanding that I would need to begin to build a feel for the language. I picked up the pace of my reading, building on the vocabulary and confidence that I had from reading. As I got more comfortable, I noticed that Google Translate would take me down rabbit holes that would take me away from reading, so I started relying more on context to understand both the individual words and the meaning of what was going on. Because of my insatiable search for new words on the road to 10,000, I devised a new way to collect words. My bookmark would be a blank note card that I would fill up with words that I didn't yet know, and every time I filled up a new note card, I had a few hundred more more words to add into Anki to add into my rotation. With this new streamlined system of reading words and trying to rely on context, I picked up the pace of my reading. I read 2,000 pages in a young adult series that my wife grew up with. I read the first 4.5 Harry Potter books and some other fiction. I also read about some German history. I read about the Holocaust. This was quality leisure time on steroids. Reading new areas meant learning new words, and learning new words meant that the progress in German was palpable. And every single day, week, month, and then eventually year, I was reading a lot, and then I was learning new words. Sometimes it would be 5 words a day, sometimes 35 a day, but this whole process was unlocked by the fact that this book served as my Rosetta Stone. And then, on January 1st of 2023, I made a decision that I should have made a lot earlier. I took the time that I was already spending on YouTube and on podcasts and said, nope, it's got to be completely in German. I made a throwaway dedicated account for watching German YouTube and searched things like astronomy, photography, tech reviews, comedy, and history, and then I subscribed to a bunch of different channels. And I figured as I watched more, the algorithm would feed me up better and better content. Completely jump-started my comprehension, and it was unbelievably fun. Rather than mostly seeing German in the controlled environment of reading of black and white pieces of paper, YouTube and podcasts became a way of seeing what I was learning in Anki as alive and breathing. In terms of how this fit into my process, particularly with podcasts, I didn't want to interrupt the flow to look up a word or create a new card, so I'd estimate that less than 1% of the words that I know came from podcasts directly, and probably 10 to 20% of the words that I know came from YouTube. But because the most common words in a language show up no matter what the form, whether that's speaking, listening, reading, etc., vocabulary wasn't an issue. As I built my listening skills, I kept up with learning new vocabulary, so the march to 10,000 continued. The initial excitement and curiosity and anticipation about what could be learned in German was now being replaced by actual enjoyment of the language as things began to click more and more and more. And with all of this reading and listening and watching and reviewing note cards, I was spending more and more time with the language. And when you stick to a routine for a while, at a certain point you pause to reflect on where you've gotten. And more than 2 years later, there hasn't been a single day that's gone by without me learning or engaging with German in some meaningful way. In terms of reviewing note cards, I've only missed 6 individual days, and all of those were Jewish holidays when my phone was powered down anyway, and I made up my reviews the next day, so in terms of a streak, I'm fine having missed those 6 days. Yes, Anki has its conditions. Doing your reviews can sometimes feel ruthless, especially if you miss a day, because then you have double the reviews to do the next day, but the results speak for themselves. Beyond spending awesome leisure time with great content on the internet and great books, doing my Anki reviews is relatively quick. On average, it only takes about 3 to 4 seconds to review each card, and in total that's less than 30 minutes to review all of my vocab cards every day, which I can do from bed, I can do it from the train, or I can do it in a dedicated work session. Plus, with how smart Anki is using AI and machine learning algorithms to set your schedule, it's tough to beat the efficiency that it provides. Taking the number of times I've reviewed the card and 3 to 4 seconds per review, for the 10,000 words that I know, I've only spent about 2.5 cumulative minutes on each of those words. Definitely seems like a fair trade-off. Over the first 2 years that I learned German, I didn't consistently pursue speaking or writing in the language. Aber ich habe eine ziemlich gute deutsche Aussprache. Ich kann über viele Themen reden. Und unabhängig davon, ob ich das richtige Worte kenne, kann ich mich anderen Leuten verständlich machen. So, while the vast majority of my time in German has been spent reading and listening and watching, having 10,000 words at my fingertips is making this process a lot easier. I also mentioned at the beginning of the video that I became a dad while learning German, so this theoretical goal became very tangible. When our son was about 3 months old, my wife and I started reading to him. He didn't understand a word that we were saying, but he liked that we were animated and he would help us flip the pages. My book of choice was Nuclear Physics for Babies, and my wife's book of choice was Der kleine Eisbär. My time with my son is the only extended period of time in my life that I've been around a baby, and I'm learning, like many other parents, how important repetition is in early childhood development. Even though my wife and I are taking the one parent, one language approach, we read him these books often enough that both of us had both books memorized within just a few weeks of starting reading with him. So now, even a year later, after we've moved on to other books, I can still tell you the story of Lars, der kleine Eisbär, lebt weit oben im Norden, wo es nur Eis und Schnee gibt. just like you can have a Rosetta Stone to learn the vocabulary and meaning of a language, a simple book can be viewed like a script to learn the majority of sounds within a language. And yes, you can be sure that I used his other baby books to learn new vocab to put into Anki. Yes, I have the obvious advantage of having a German-speaking wife, but especially early on, my speaking skills were so bad that I didn't want to try to turn my marriage into a language exchange. After all the work that I've put in, we'll converse during meals or when we're out on a walk together, and we'll talk about how our day is going or bigger ideas. The process of speaking and output in general is very slow, and it's taking place over the course of months. But it has been a great way to gauge how effortlessly German can just flow in my mind. Okay, so I guess what next? Taken some time to appreciate how enjoyable the process of getting to 10,000 words was. But even more than that, German is now just an avenue to building my life. Our 15-month-old son is just beginning to speak, so now I get to read with him, get to explore the world with him. And I get to see him bond with my wife without feeling locked out of one half of the one parent, one language setup that we have. I also get to deepen my relationship with my wife, whether that's just by learning more about the way that she grew up or when German has the perfect way of expressing something. I get to watch the news in German, I listen to podcasts in German, and in general, just a new part of the world has been unlocked for me. I just get to spend more time with the language and people that I love. I'm still learning new words, and I'm still reviewing the 10,000 that I already know. I hope by having shared this process and my journey, I'll have captured a moment in time for a personal milestone and maybe shown one or two tricks when it comes to learning a language that you're trying to build a fondness for.